So thank you everyone for joining us today. Rich, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I am Clemence Kuchera. I'm the Assistant Dean for the Graduate Law Programs here at McGeorge School of Law, part of University of the Pacific. And our guest speaker today is Professor Rich Deitchman, who is an adjunct professor here at McGeorge. He actually teaches water resources law for our MSL program. And he is also regional counsel for the Conservation Fund. And if you have, I'm sure you're going to mention what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go through it.
Wonderful. So I think many of you are logged in here to hear Professor Deitchman. So I'm going to turn this over to you, and then I'll take over at the end of your presentation, talk a little bit about McGeorge's MSL programs, and we'll both stay on to answer your questions.
Great. I'll share my screen, and I think you need to unshare.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Make sure I share. Can you see? Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you, Dean Kuchera, for the opportunity. My name is Rich Deitchman, and I am an adjunct professor at McGeorge. I teach the water resources law class in the MSL program. And then my day job is that I'm currently the regional counsel for the Pacific region for an organization called the Conservation Fund. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the presentation as well. And overall talk about how I think the MSL is a great degree program to learn more, to be able to work, particularly in the fields of water, environmental law, and deal with climate change issues, which are really important in all the work that I do today. So hopefully I can share a little bit about what I do and learn something from that. So first, I don't really like to talk about myself, but I thought, I talk about who's this guy who's talking to you and my path into water law. And really, frankly, what I wanted to show you is that from what I did and where I got to where I am today, very easily could have gone down the path of obtaining a degree like the MSL and worked a lot on water law and policy issues, even though I am a JD. So I actually started in college and actually did a graduate degree in hydrology, which is the science of the study of water. And there got a real appreciation for how kind of an interdisciplinary background can be very useful for dealing with environmental issues. I chose to further my education with law school because I really enjoyed how science impacts policy, or in many cases doesn't, which is an issue that I think is really important to learn about and something that we teach in the water law class. So I went to law school. I did various internships at non-governmental orgs in government and in private practice. That led me to a private practice position. So I spent over a decade practicing water and environmental law at a firm in Sacramento, working across the Western United States, mostly on water law issues, doing a lot of litigation, which was the result of some of the issues that I'm going to talk about today substantively, dealing with drought. Drought drove a lot of people to court to fight over water rights. And personally, just doing constant litigation wasn't really for me. So I've recently relocated to a different position, working for a nonprofit organization called the Conservation Fund, trying to solve a lot of these water, environmental, and climate change issues from a non-litigation perspective. And then I note on the slide, just I've had the opportunity to work in various states all over the West with a big emphasis on California. So I thought I'd spend a couple minutes just kind of talking about water law in general and focus on California, and then why climate change is very important and why I think we need more people out there with really strong interdisciplinary backgrounds who can study, integrate science and policy into our laws and how we move forward. So, just really briefly, the important thing about water law in California and really in any Western state is that our water laws actually go back to the latter half of the 1800s, and they really haven't changed to where we are today. But California has changed a lot. We now have a population near 40 million people. And due to climate change, we're seeing significantly more drought years. And then on the other hand, we're also seeing significantly more flood years in the alternating years, or we go 20 to 30 years with dry and then terrible floods, just like last winter. And so our water laws really don't account for that change. They're really built on conditions from 100 years ago. And that is making things very challenging. And so I'm not going to dwell too much on this slide, but one of the things that we teach in the MSL Water Resources Law class is about kind of key California water law concepts. And when I was in school 10 or 15 years ago, water law seemed like this sort of, even at that time, seemed like a really interesting subject. I ended up devoting my career to it, but it largely was, if you were interested in history, you might like water law because it was all about, what was going on in the, 1900s, and that locks in water rights for today. And the reality is you need to learn all that to then be able to go forward and figure out how do we fix the problem. And so in the MSL course, we kind of walk through all the California water law concepts. And they're up here. The key thing going back to kind of this 1800s basis for water law is that, in most of the Western states, including California, this concept called beneficial use, which is something that's defined in the law, is kind of what determines what a water right is. So, a beneficial use might be a right for irrigation, or right for a municipal and industrial use, and so forth. And really, the law was designed to maximize use of water resources and not necessarily, protect, fish and wildlife habitat, although that has evolved in the beneficial use determination. So in the course, we kind of walk through all these concepts. In California, it's really interesting. I don't know where all the folks on the call are from, but in California, the Constitution of the state actually talks about water and has Article 10, Section 2 provides that reasonable and beneficial use is a requirement for water. What that means has been litigated through California courts for centuries, and something that we talk about in the course. But what's important there is that this reasonable use doctrine exists. It really never was used much as a tool to respond to climate change and changes in river flows and so forth, but more recently it is. So we get into that in the course. There's also a really key distinction between surface water rights and groundwater rights. The surface water rights in California have a super complicated system that deals with water rights that go back to way before 1914, which is when the state finally required a permit to use water. And so a lot of litigation and so forth goes over, what is the authority of the state to even deal with people who have really, really senior water rights. So those are the water rights that are most likely to be fulfilled even in a time of drought. And then the next part, and something we also address in the course, is a really interesting new area of California water law dealing with groundwater. And up until 2014, there really was no groundwater law in California, which is very strange. A lot of states have, some kind of law protecting groundwater or controlling the use. Up until 2014, really, you didn't really have to stop pumping out of a well until, maybe your neighbor's groundwater was being impacted and they brought an action in court and a judge told you to stop pumping out of the well. Now there's this new thing called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which involves local control of groundwater resources. And in that process, various groundwater basins are developing plans to manage groundwater. And it's an exciting development because some of those new groundwater agencies are taking into account changes due to climate change. So, what are the complications from climate change with respect to water law? And, in the course, we talk a lot about this. And again, I think this is my next slide talks about what can we do about it, which I think really ties into the MSL program. But just a couple of very important concepts, if you're not too familiar with water laws, that most water laws are state laws. So each of the various states in the West and also in the East have laws that control the use of water and the property rights in water. But then there's also federal law connections. So a lot of you are probably familiar with like the Endangered Species Act. And the Endangered Species Act actually has an enormous impact on water use. I worked for nearly a decade dealing with water users and water interests in the Klamath Basin up in Oregon. And there you had a whole series of state water rights where people had property rights in water under Oregon state law. And then on top of that, you have the Endangered Species Act, which was there to protect certain species of salmon that are listed as threatened or endangered. And ultimately, there's this really interesting interplay between federal and state law, which is something that water law and water policy practitioners deal with on pretty much a daily basis. Also, really brief mention, just a summary is that federal law can also play a role in interstate basins. So this is a really interesting area where climate change is playing an enormous role because a lot of rivers just no longer have the same flow regime that they used to. And in most cases, this is clearly due to climate change. And then there are rivers that flow across international borders, and McGeorge also has a great international water law program. So it's something you can study here. But I worked for many years on the Rio Grande River in Texas and New Mexico, and a key part of the water allocation there dealt with how much water the United States must leave and allow flow down to the country of Mexico. And those numbers, were locked in like the 1920s. But meanwhile, the river flow has changed completely. So understanding kind of the science and policy behind that and how the federal law treaties might impact, how users of water in a state is becoming really interesting and with climate change. And then just briefly, there's just a lot of differences in climate between states. And, we know from scientists that there are areas that are going to have increased drought, and really other areas in the country might just have increased rain or increased variability and predictability, lack of predictability in how weather and ultimately hydrologic flows, meaning how much water in the system works. So, really what I see a great opportunity is how do laws and policies account for that? And that was the main reason I got into sort of law and policy, was because frankly, the laws are way behind. As I said, California water law is mostly locked in as of the 1800s. So there's currently excellent opportunities and legislation floating on how to update water laws. It's a huge task. There's a lot of people who obviously don't want these to change, those folks who hold the best water rights. But there's great opportunities in both the kind of the government relations, legal, and other fields. So, that was a real brief overview of kind of climate change and water, but what do we do about it? And these are three things that I see. One is the importance of an interdisciplinary approach. So just as an example, in the Water Resources Law MSL class this past fall, we had a great variety of students. Some students had no background or interest really in water ever before taking the class, and I think they enjoyed it. And some students, I had a student who was an assistant general manager of a water district in California. And so the opportunity for those folks to interact in our discussions in the course were really, really valuable. And frankly, I learned a lot from both the students who had a lot of water background and the students who had none. Some of those students came from, a social work background where they were focused more on maybe equity issues, and they saw ways to maybe integrate some of their work into water. But overall, I see, the climate is changing. It's going to impact water and environmental law. And you can't just have a bunch of lawyers in a room trying to figure this out. You need to have a whole bunch of people from policy backgrounds, from just working with people type backgrounds and those kind of things. So I see a great benefit to the MSL program to learn a little bit about water and how you might be able to help. Real briefly, the impact of climate change on those federalism tensions. I think I touched on that just before, but there's you might be able to know everything about state water law, and then there's a international treaty that then impacts the water allocation, and climate change is definitely impacting that because a lot of these treaties, a lot of the laws that deal with river allocation were locked in at a time when water was more plentiful. And then lastly, just more adaptive water management. That's kind of a topic in and of itself. But you know, how do we make our planning, you know, in California, we have CEQA that deals with planning and that kind of thing, more open to including considerations that deal with kind of a changing water regime. So I'm just going to end with this. You know, I now work at an organization. I that's called the Conservation Fund. The mission there is up on the screen. You know, and I just want to kind of plug this a little bit as I used to work at a law firm where my colleagues were, you know, 95% lawyers. And frankly, I enjoyed the opportunity to get out of a law firm. Now on the day-to-day, I work with folks in government relations. I work with real estate managers. I work with finance folks and kind of folks who come from all these different backgrounds, have degrees or professional background in all different areas, but everyone is sort of mission driven and focused on trying to basically how do we deal with kind of the environment and climate that we have and find solutions as opposed to kind of fighting with people in court. And so I work with several people who have master's degrees in public policy and those kind of things. So I, you know, frankly, doing what I do today, I am still practicing law, but the benefit of having a graduate education, just understanding law and policy, to me, I really see that every day in my current job. And so I'm just going to talk really briefly about two projects. Here's just kind of a map of, this is actually the Colorado River. Here's a project that we're working on where we're trying to, you know, not fight with people over water allocation, but rather use grant money to buy, I don't have a pointer here, but buy over 2,000 acres of land that is adjacent to the Colorado River. So on the left side is California, on the right side is Arizona. All this land here is mostly, it's alfalfa that's grown. A lot of it is actually exported abroad. But the land happens to have the most senior, highest priority water rights in the entire Colorado River Basin, which if you kind of follow the news lately, the Colorado River is struggling. And so at my current organization, the Conservation Fund, we're in contract to buy over 2,000 acres here, get it out of alfalfa production, sell some of it back to the state of California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who will restore the river, meaning sort of the river has been degraded over time due to you know, farming and otherwise. Create a more sustainable farm on parts of the land and so forth. Just a really cool project, but that's the kind of project where bringing folks who have, you know, policy backgrounds, who understand the legal system, but also maybe bring something else, so whether it be a science background or so forth, can come in and find solutions. And that's what I got out of teaching the MSL water resources law this semester is I'm always looking for people that want to find solutions as opposed to want to fight about something. And I think getting this background is really helpful to understand. You need to understand how the system works in order to then be able to move forward and try to fix it. And then I'll just plug another recent deal that we're working on. This one isn't directly water related, more environment related. Conservation Fund actually yesterday closed on a property that it literally just borders San Jose development. It's a 3,600 acre property that will eventually be half in habitat protection, half as a San Jose, Santa Clara County park. And there's 5 protected species who live on the property, and the public agencies who ultimately will buy the property from my organization have certain obligations to comply with habitat conservation plans. So the goal there is to just kind of have this forever great lasting habitat right on the border of San Jose, and also have some public access to allow people to actually see it. So I just kind of plug these as two types of projects where, you know, the climate is changing and bringing really interesting interdisciplinary solutions is one way to resolve that. And I really think, you know, an MSL type student and someone with that background can bring a lot to these projects, to knowing how law and policy works, but then bringing a different perspective is really great. So I think I'll leave it at that and open it to questions. I hope that was interesting and helpful.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was very interesting. Before I take questions. Sorry,
Okay,
I'm going to
sorry.
go ahead and just finish quickly with my presentation. You have mentioned a few times the MSL degree. So for those of you who don't know what an MSL degree is, it's not a paralegal degree. It's not a JD degree either. So a Juris Doctor, that's what JD stands for. You're not doing this program to be able to take a bar exam, to practice law. You're doing this program because you want to have particular knowledge in a particular area of law. So in today, like we're talking about water and environmental law. So it's a very much focused degree, but it's a law degree. But yet it is for non-lawyers. It's a degree that is newer in the United States, although like we've had our program at McGeorge for at least 10 years. And of the 200 plus ABA accredited law schools, the vast majority of them have a type of MSL program. Because we offer a concentration to our law students in water and environmental law, it was natural for us to create an MSL in water and environmental law. Also being here in Sacramento, like it made a lot of sense for us to do so. So we have 3 fully online concentrations: business law, government law and policy, and water and environmental law. And then we have 3 hybrids. So either a general one, human resources, and health law. So today we're really much talking about the MSL in water and environmental law. And I think that Professor Deitchman explained clearly like the benefit of getting this degree and who would benefit from it. Our program is taught in a fully online interactive but asynchronous manner. So you don't have to log in at a specific time to do your homework, but yet you still have weekly deadline and weekly discussion and weekly interactions with your colleagues in class and with the professor. This is just a quick overview of our curriculum. I'm not going to go over each of the classes, but you can see that we have 8 required courses like that focus in water and environmental law. And then we have a number of electives. So in the electives, you will see that some of those courses are not water and environmental law focused, but yet there is so much overlap with our 2 other online concentration that our water and environmental law students are able to take some of those classes, such as lobbying and politics, negotiation and settlements, or even business organizations. The students are able to build the curriculum that fits their career goal. Our students also in the MSL program can decide the pace at which they want to complete the program. This is a 26-unit degree. Law school units tends to be quite rigorous. We recommend students to do 2 classes at a time to complete the program over 2 years, so 4 semesters, assuming you're working full-time. If you don't work full-time, you may be able to accelerate the program. And we've also had many students do it over more 3 years just because of other commitment that they have. And you certainly have this flexibility with our program. So what makes our online program degrees distinctive? As I mentioned, we teach in asynchronous lectures, yet we have weekly discussion and where you will be getting feedback from the professors or feedback from your colleagues, from the other students in the class. You have ungraded quizzes. You have several chat opportunities for you to expand on your learning. The professors focus a lot on practical real-world assignments. And we do hear this often from alumni that they were able to actually use what they learn in class and directly implement it to their day-to-day work. As we've mentioned, you're going to get regular feedback from your professor. And I think overall, like we have a very collegial online learning community. For those of you who wants to engage in such community, you certainly do not have to. You can just be a student in each of your classes and never have to engage, outside of those classes. But if you wanted to, we have plenty of opportunities to create that community. So next step, we have, this is not the right information, but the next step, because we are admitting students for fall of 2024, our priority application deadline is June 1st. And our classes starts on August 12th. I am going to post in the chat right now I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to post in the chat the direct link to our application for those of you who are interested. In the meantime, I think we can go ahead and take your questions. So you can post your question in the chat or in the Q&A box. Should also mention that in addition to the MSL in Water and Environmental Law, we also have an LLM in Water and Environmental Law for those of you who already have a law background. Okay, so I see that we have a question. Oh, well, can you speak about the LLM program? Yes, so our LLM in Water and Environmental Law, that we have one that is fully online also. The LLM program is 24 credits. A lot of the MSL classes are also our LLM classes. We obviously are not going to have you retake our introduction to legal analysis or legal writing as well as contracts because you already have a prior law background. For MSL students, like this is like their first foundational courses that they have to take. The LLM program can be done full-time over a year, but otherwise most students do it over 2 years. We actually have currently a few students enrolled in the program, and one of our students who is who practiced law in healthcare prior to joining our LLM in Water and Environmental Law just emailed me to tell me that she got a position at a local firm here in Sacramento that practice water and environmental law. So that's exactly what she wanted. We have a lot of network, very large network in this particular field. Our professor, Jennifer Harder, who is the faculty director for the online programs and the faculty director for the water and environmental law concentrations for the JD students, have tons of connections. And obviously there's also Professor Deitchman that, has practiced law in Sacramento for more than 10 years. So, so you really do have access to networking opportunities. Is there any specific questions that you have regarding the LLM program? And I'm going to post in the chat the application for the LLM program. Let's see. What is the acceptance rate? And with that, how competitive are the applicants? Should I have a minimum experience in water law? So I think as Professor Deitchman mentioned, like he had students with no experience. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was zero expectation of any experience in water law. I know it's a required course in the MSL, but there are plenty of folks in the class who hopefully they enjoyed it, but they might move on and never do water law, but maybe they'll think about it a little bit more. We do an interesting final paper in that course, which will probably carry through for future years, where we do a deep dive into your own water supplier, which is actually pretty interesting for certain folks because it's sort of sounds a little basic, but it's like you turn on the tap, where did it come from? And this is a much deeper in studying kind of the whole water rights portfolio of your water supplier and doing an analysis. So I think that's a great opportunity to learn something, but you don't have to actually have any background from my perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, and how competitive are the applicants? It is competitive, but usually we end up speaking with the applicants, either applying through and guiding them towards the first the appropriate degree, LLM or MSL degree. And through the application process, we are able to do an initial review as we're speaking with the applicants and doing an initial review of the application. We do a holistic review of the application. So let's say you graduated 10 years ago with your bachelor's degree, and you perhaps like a couple semesters, did not do as well as what you were hoping for. We completely understand. As I mentioned, it is a rigorous program, so we probably would have follow-up questions for you, maybe even do an interview with you to talk a little bit more about about our program and making sure that what has impacted you when you were doing your bachelor's degree, like, won't impact also your law studies as well here. We have academic support of an academic support office, so that can assist you throughout your studies. So overall, I would say it is competitive. We keep our classes fairly small because we do want to have a lot of interactions between faculty and students and amongst students. So for the MSL, we enroll 10 to 15 each term. So if you're interested and you want to schedule a one-on-one with me, please go ahead and email me and we can talk about your career goals, talk about the program. Would this be a good fit? Talk a little bit about your background and how best to present this on your application for you to be the most successful with your application process. Okay, so here's another question. I haven't practiced law in about 10 years and will take the California bar. You're retired. I understand that retired from New York because I'm also retired from New York. So I studied at with what and worked with. You do not need to be a member of a bar to do the LLM program. You need to have graduated from either an ABA accredited law schools with a JD degree or have passed a bar exam in the United States. Now, if you wanted to take the California bar during your studies, like we've had students doing that, it's certainly possible, it's feasible. We would probably want to discuss this a bit just because, as you know, studying for a bar exam can requires a lot of time and preparation, and I see that you're working full-time. So it may be where, like, maybe you take 2 semesters of studies here at McGeorge, and then you do a leave of absence for a semester as you are preparing for the bar exam, or you take the bar exam in the summer, so you have May, June, July to prep for the July bar exam. We would want to, to set you up to be successful in both on the bar exam and with your law studies. Any suggestions, any other advice, Professor Deitchman?
No, I wouldn't want to take the bar exam in the middle of an academic semester, but I actually took 2 bar exams. I took the California initially and then took Oregon several years later, and it's not very fun to go take the bar again. So yeah, good luck there. But you could do it. California is the worst because you can't. I don't know. Maybe that's changing whether you can waive into California, but
you can't waive into California, and you
yeah.
cannot. There is no reciprocity with any other state.
Yeah.
Although the California bar is now 2 days only compared to you took it, that was 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I don't have an LLM degree, but I think it's a great program, particularly if you kind of want to shift your area of focus.
Yes. Any other questions? I think so. You all should have now my email address. I posted in the chat. Please do reach out to me. And if you have particular questions, specific question for Professor Deitchman, like I will forward your email to him. But since I'm not seeing any additional questions and being mindful of everyone's very busy life, I think this marked, oh, well, thank you so much.
And I added my email, my personal email, if you want to have any further questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? You only send it to the panelists. So I'm just gonna take it. I'm gonna.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Hopefully, spell it
there you
correctly. Go. Perfect. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you for joining us, and we very much look forward to continuing the discussion with you individually. So look forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much, Professor Deitchman, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening. So.
Okay. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.